Hello and welcome back to Something Z, and welcome to what if Deku went to the support course. So the what if begins the same with Izuku finding out that he will not have a quirk. But what changes is later that night, when his mom left the room, he decided that he can still become a hero, even if it's without a quirk. So he then goes on his computer and he starts to research about technology and mechanics. And years later he completes his first piece of hero tech, which were sunglasses with night vision, heat sense, and a zoom in feature. And all these features can be activated solely with his voice. So now we are at the beginning of the series, and when Izuku's teacher asks who wants to be in the hero course, Izuku and Bakugo both raise their hands. And after Bakugo realizes that Izuku raised his hand, he said that no matter how much of a nerd he is, he can never be a hero without a quirk. So we skip a couple of hours, and Izuku stayed after class to write down some hero notes about Mount Lady, and he was about to leave, but before he got his things in his backpack, Bakugo and his friends walked into the classroom, and after saying Izuku is useless, Bakugo explodes Izuku's notebook, then he throws it out the window. And a couple minutes later, Bakugo and his friends leave. So after Izuku got his notebook, he walked home, but this time Izuku takes a different route to his house, so he never gets attacked, and thus never meets All Might. So when he got home, he looked up the rules of the UA entrance exams, and the rules allow him to use weapons if they are registered beforehand, and if you have a good reason. So after a couple of days, Izuku was able to create a metal bow staff that could extend up to 10 feet via his voice, and its average size is around 5 feet. After he creates his weapon, he registers his 2 items, then he starts his physical training. But when he registered his weapon and tech for the exams, he didn't just sign up for the hero course, but just in case if he failed, he signed up for the support course. So we now skip to the day of the exams, and by that time Izuku has become adept at using his bow staff, and he is now stronger than he was before, but he isn't as strong as he was in the canon since he didn't do the beach cleaning, but he is still pretty strong. So when Izuku got to the school, he had his 2 items on him. But right after he entered the gates of UA, he tripped on a pebble, and right before he could catch himself using his bow staff, he stopped falling and he started to float. And when he realized this, he stopped moving completely. And when he did, a girl who he believed stopped him from falling adjusted him, so now he's standing up straight. And after they talked for a bit, the girl who saved him said her name was Ochako. Then she walked into the exam hall, and shortly after she entered the hall, he walks into the exam hall as well. And when all the examinees get into the hall, President Mike explains the exams, and when he finishes, he hands everyone a written exam, which Izuku was able to pass easily. So now we skip an hour, and everyone who passed their written exams are currently standing outside the second phase of the exams. And after a couple of minutes, President Mike appears on top of a nearby tower, and when he does, he sees Izuku, and when he sees him, he shouts, asking if he's allowed to have his gear. And Izuku responds by saying he's the quirkless person who applied his gear. So after hearing this, Mike says he's sorry and wishes him good luck. Then he starts to count down, and when he reaches 0, the gates leading to the next phase open. And when the gates open completely, everyone runs in, with Izuku being behind the big group of examinees. And to save some time, Izuku was able to destroy a couple of robots. So by the end of the test, he had around 30 points. But right before the exams came to a close, the examiners released the 0-pointer. And when the examinees noticed them, they all ran away. And Izuku was about to do the exact same thing. But before he got too far, he heard someone yell from pain. And when he looked behind him, he saw the girl that saved him earlier, trapped under a rock. So he ran back to help. And the way he got the rock off of her was by lifting the rocks as much as he could. And eventually he was able to squeeze his bow staff underneath. Then he made it extend, pushing the rock just enough so she could wiggle her leg out. But when the bow staff extended, it pushed itself into the ground with the weight of the rock. So Izuku didn't have time to get it back. But he didn't care about that. He cared about how the girl was feeling. So he asked if she's okay, and she responds by saying she will have to limp. But seeing as the 0-pointer was getting closer to them, Izuku picked her up and he started to run away, with the 0-pointer slowly chasing after them. And it crushed Izuku's bow staff in the process. And less than a minute later, the exam ends with a loud horn that rang through the whole city, stopping the giant robot as well. And that's when he puts her down. And after a thank you, the two go their own ways. So we skip a couple of days, and while Izuku is sitting on the couch watching TV, his mom comes in yelling, saying that he has a letter from UA. So when he heard this, he took the letter and he went to his room. And when he opened it, a hologram got activated, and what he saw was All Might in a suit, who said, "Hello, I am here as a projection, Izuku Midoriya. I am sorry to say this, but you didn't get enough points to pass the hero exams. But don't fret, the examiners were watching you, and they were impressed with not just your bow staff, but your tech classes as well. So you have been accepted into the support course. Welcome Izuku Midoriya to UA High." So now we skip to the first day of school, and when he entered the room H1, he sees a room full of tech and equipment, with the hero power loader standing at a workbench at the end of the class. And when he sees Izuku, he tells him to find a workspace that's empty, and Izuku eventually finds one at the furthest corner from the door. And when he sits down, he notices the person sitting right next to him, who was talking to herself about possible inventions she could make, but she was talking so fast that he could only make out every 10 words. and when the bell rang, class started, with everyone introducing themselves. And it's there that he learns that the person right next to him was Mei Hatsume, and that whole beginning of the day was just them coming up with ideas for future projects. So we skipped to lunch, and before the bell rang, Power Loader said that whoever wanted to stay over for lunch could. And Izuku stayed back since he wanted to build his bow staff again, just because he hasn't built a new one, and he wanted something to remember his dream to be a hero. And to his surprise, the only other person that stayed was Mei, who started to work at her bench, already creating blueprints for something. So by the end of lunch, Izuku, with the help of the things in the workshop, was able to create a simple bow staff with no special features. But before the bell rang for lunch to end, Power Loader came back from his lunch. And when he walked in, he saw the two were already creating things, so he was impressed. So he walked over to Izuku and he asked what he was creating. And Izuku responds by saying he just made a replica of his staff he used in the entrance exam, just so he can have something to remember the time when he had a shot to be a pro hero. But when Power Loader heard this, he tells Izuku that the exam wasn't the final shot he had, and that in a month the UA Sports Festival will commence. And if he can make it far enough, then he may have a chance to be transferred into the hero course. Izuku then asks how will he ever be able to do that since he's quirkless, and that everyone else in the school at least has a quirk, so they automatically have a better chance than him. And then Power Loader tells him that he can equal it out if he works hard enough, since he can bring his gadgets to the festival, but the only restrictions are they will have to be approved and they will have to be created by you. Hearing all of this, Izuku starts to beam with excitement, since that means that his dreams aren't dead just yet, and it means he has one more shot. From that day on, Izuku worked on his projects anytime he could, and in the span of time before the festival, he was able to perfect his bow staff, with it now able to fit in his pocket, and if he says extend then a number between 1 and 10, it will do that many feet. So if he takes it out of his pocket then says extend 3, it will extend to be 3 feet long. And he was barely able to make 2 more things, with one of them being a modification to his normal shoes, and he was able to make them shoot out flames, giving him the ability to fly, and to activate them he would have to press a button on the sides of his shoes that were near his ankles. He also made gloves that shot out high pressured air. So with the last bit of time he had left, he created a prototype that would suck as much air as possible into a container on each finger, and on every container there was a lever, and if he pulls it, it will shoot out high pressured air. So you may be thinking, why did Izuku make those 2 items in particular? The reason is, Izuku still admires Bakugo and All Might, so he wanted to make something similar to their powers, with the gloves representing All Might's shockwaves, and the shoes to represent Bakugo's ability to fly and his explosion quirk. And during the time before the sports festival, Izuku and Mai became close friends, spending lunch together, building their own tech. So we skip to the day of the festival, and when all the first years get to the stadium, they have a moment of silence for the student who died during the attack on the USJ. And the name of the student was Tsuyu Asui, since Izuku wasn't there to help, and if he wasn't there, Mineta would have gone last on the quirk test, and that would mean he would have gone kicked out, so that would leave Sue alone. So I personally don't think she could have survived the attack at the boat alone. So when the moment of silence ended, Midnight, who was the referee for the first years, began to explain the rules of the first phase, which was an obstacle race. So when she was done explaining, everyone lined up at the stadium door, and when everyone was ready, she started to count down. And when she reached 0, all of the students began to run through the hallway, with Izuku being somewhere in the middle of the crowd. But before Izuku got through the hallway, someone covered the ground with ice, taking most of the students to the ground. But when Izuku noticed this, he clicked the buttons on his shoes, and his shoes started to shoot flames underneath him. And after 5 seconds, he was beginning to fly up. And when he was able to balance himself, he flew over everyone, eventually getting out of the hallway, and he continued to fly through the course until eventually he noticed the crowd of people right in front of multiple 0-pointers. But he didn't care about the 0-pointers or the crowd. What he cared about was the person flying over them. And the person that just flew over them was Bakugo. And from just seeing Bakugo, Izuku got filled up with anger and determination. Determination to beat Bakugo for the first time in his life. So he flew as fast as he could towards Bakugo, but eventually Izuku started to run out of fuel for his shoes, so he had to stop flying after the canyon. So when he landed, he continued to run until he got to the landmines. But with his shoes gone, Izuku at first believed that he was done for, and that he doesn't even have a shot at even passing the first phase, since so many people were ahead of him and walking across the mines. But after a bit of time, Izuku came up with a plan, so he started to push the mine slowly into a pit using his staff. And when there were enough mines, Izuku pointed his staff at the mines and towards the school, and then he said extend 10. And when the staff heard this, it started to extend quickly, and the extending activated the mines, so they all started to blow up, launching Izuku high into the air. And while Izuku is being launched, he uses 2 of his fingers to get launched even further. So Izuku got launched past Bakugo and someone with red and white hair, who both stopped what they were doing because they wanted to see the huge explosion behind them. And when Bakugo saw Izuku pass him, his face got covered in anger, and he started to rush toward the school, with the red and white haired person following them. But Izuku, before he landed, used 2 more fingers to explode the mines right in front of the two, not just stopping them for a second, but it also cushioned his fall, and it launched him past the rest of the landmines. And right before he hit the ground, he went to a roll, cushioning more of the fall. Then he picked himself up and he continued to run. So the 3 continued to run until eventually they all make it to the stadium, with Bakugo coming in first place, Todoroki in second, and Izuku in third. But even though Izuku didn't win, he got the loudest applause, since when Izuku launched himself with the mines, President Mike talked about Izuku, and he told everyone that he was quirkless, and that he was able to make it in third place was crowd pleasing. So now we skip to when everyone got back to the stadium. So when Midnight brings them back to the middle, she explains the rules for the next round, which was the cavalry battle. And when she was done explaining the rules, she gave the students 15 minutes to find a team. And after some convincing, Izuku was able to team up with Hatsume, since it could show off both of their inventions. So while he was looking for 2 more people, he saw the girl he saved during the entrance exams talking to a guy with glasses that he recognized from the exams as well, and they seemed to be talking to each other alone. So Izuku walked close to them and listened to their conversation a bit, and they were talking about who they should join. So Izuku walked up to them and he asked if they would like to join his group with his friend Hatsume, and after talking for a bit, they accepted his offer. So we skipped 15 minutes, and Izuku is the one on top, with Ida at the back, and the 2 girls at the sides. And the 2 girls are wearing hover boots, while Ida is normal, since he could keep up with them. And when it actually started, everyone tried to go after Bakugo, since he had the 1 million headband, while Ida practically carried his whole team, since the 2 hovered, and Izuku became weightless because of Uchako. So they were able to easily escape people, and when they could, they would snatch some headbands. But after 20 minutes, Bakugo was able to find Izuku, and when he saw him, he told his team to charge at him, which they did. At first, Ida was going to run away, but when Izuku noticed that Ida was firing up his engines again, he told him to stop, and he tells him to charge at Bakugo, which he does, so Ida runs straight at them. And when the 2 collide, Bakugo tries to explode Izuku right in the chest, but before he could, Izuku launches air at his stomach, surprising Bakugo, since he hasn't seen Izuku use his gloves yet. Then Izuku tries to grab his headband, but Bakugo was able to quickly recover, and he was able to grab onto Izuku's wrist before Izuku's hand touched his headband. But before anything else could happen, Todoroki's team showed up, and they tried to grab Bakugo's headband as well. So Bakugo let go of Izuku, and that's when Izuku told Ida to run. And in a second, Ida was about 5 feet away, and with the rest of the time Izuku and his team had left, they snatched up as many headbands as they could. But at the last minute, he watched Bakugo and Todoroki fight, since he wanted to know more about the red and white haired person. And at the last second, Bakugo tried to reach for Todoroki's headband. And at that second, Todoroki lost control, so he used his fire quirk, which made Bakugo not grab him. And not only did Bakugo notice, Izuku noticed as well. And when Midnight said to stop, the cavalry battle ended. And Izuku's team had enough points to pass, and they were given a lunch break. So we skipped to the end of lunch, and Izuku was able to repair anything that was broken, and he fueled up everything. And when they got back to the stadium, Midnight told everyone that the next phase of the festival will be one-on-ones. Then on the board behind her, she shows who will fight who, and all the matches will be the same. And the same thing will happen with Ojiro and a student from Class 1B, so they resign. So when Midnight's done explaining the rules, they tell Izuku and Shinso to go to the prep room to prepare themselves, and she tells everyone else to go to the bleachers. But before the match started, Ojiro goes to Izuku's meeting room, and he tells him about Shinso's quirk. And Ojiro just finished right before Izuku had to go for the match, so quickly Ojiro leaves, but before he leaves he tells Izuku his name. So now we skip to when the match actually starts, and since he was warned not to talk, Izuku starts off with his staff being around 7 feet, and when everything was ready the match began, with Shinso asking questions such as, why are you trying so hard for something so unachievable? When are you going to wake up and realize that you're wasting time? But even though those comments made Izuku want to shout at him, telling him he's wrong, he kept his mouth shut, and he charged at Shinso since he wanted to prove he can become a hero. And eventually after some fighting, Izuku was able to grab onto Shinso's arm, and he was able to toss Shinso out of the arena. And after Midnight shouted that Izuku was the winner, Izuku ran to Shinso, and he grabbed his hand, pulling him up. Then he said that anyone can be a hero as long as they work hard. Then he asked Shinso a question, which was, could he be his friend, since Izuku didn't have that many? And to Izuku's surprise, Shinso says sure. So now we skip to the match between Izuku and Todoroki, and all the matches prior will be the exact same. And when everything was prepared, the match began, and when it did, Todoroki launched a wave of ice at Izuku, but Izuku was able to dodge it by turning on his shoes, then flying out of the way of the ice. Then it became Todoroki launching ice attack after ice attack, while Izuku dodged all of them. But after the 10th ice wave, Todoroki was able to hit Izuku mid-air in the sole of his left shoe, making it so Izuku can't rely on his flying anymore. So Izuku then charged at Todoroki, and he used his staff to push him out of the way of any ice attacks. But with every attack, Izuku could tell Todoroki was getting slower. But eventually Todoroki used one giant ice wave that was as big as Izuku. But Izuku was able to break the ice by using his whole left hand, by shooting a high-pressured air attack, and the air was so that it was able to push Todoroki back a bit. Then he shouts at Todoroki to use everything he's got, and that he knows he's been holding back on him and everyone else this entire time, since he saw Todoroki use his fire quirk earlier. And he asks, "Why aren't you using it, your other half?" Then Todoroki shouts that it's none of his business, and to just continue the fight. But Izuku responds by saying it is his business, since he does not want to win against someone who doesn't try his best. "I may not know anything about you, I may just be some random stranger, but my point still stands. How dare you want to be a hero, something almost everyone wants to be, have one of the most powerful quirks, the chance of a lifetime to make your mark. But all you want to do is hold back, and you still want to win? While people like me who are born with no power at all have to use everything we have to become even a fraction of who you are." Then Todoroki says that he doesn't understand anything, and that he should give up whatever Izuku's trying to do, and that he will never use his power. Then Izuku says that it's your power, not his. Hearing this, Todoroki starts to reflect about everything, and his whole left side starts to get engulfed in flames. So it's then that they went for one final attack, with Izuku activating his right shoe, launching himself as fast as he could at Todoroki, and Todoroki used both of his quirks to launch a huge wave at Izuku. And Izuku, seeing this, tried to use all of his fingers, but all it did was blow away the flames and make the ice stop. So Izuku then turned off his shoe and ran on the ice towards Todoroki, and when he got close enough, he tried to jump from the ice to attack Todoroki. But right before the staff hit Todoroki, Todoroki was able to trap Izuku in a block of ice, making him the winner. And that's where I'm going to leave the what if. I hope you enjoyed it, but I hope to see you next time on Something Z.